So, thank you everyone for joining us today on the Ortelius podcast. And today we are talking about CICD trends. And thank you very much, Sasha, for joining me today. And thank you very much, Brian, for joining me. So, we are living in a different part of the world. I'm living in the Islamabad, Pakistan, and Sasha in the Cape Town. And Brian, tell us where you are from.
I am in San Diego, California. I've been here for quite a few years, but I was also born and raised in Palo Alto, California. So I still kind of consider San Francisco Bay area home.
Yes, absolutely. So let me introduce myself to my audience first. My name is Simon Sufder. I'm a developer advocate at Van Clouds. Recently joined the company, and also a traffic ambassador and the CDF Foundation ambassador. And recently, they gave me this title. I'm really excited about that. And now, Sasha, it's your turn. Introduce yourself now.
Hi there, I'm Sasha. I work for a company called QVisor. We specialize in taking applications for companies and migrating them into the cloud and making microservices out of them.
Thank you. And now, Brian.
Yes. And Sasha, thanks for that introduction. You probably have no shortage of people that need your services at this time. So I've recently moved over from the Linux Foundation to join a company called Ripple, where I'll be helping work with partners to drive new use cases around blockchain, cryptocurrency, and tokenization. I've spent a career focused on helping developers and the people that surround them optimize software development and delivery, with a particular focus on not only the tools, technology, process, and practices, but also the people and culture of software development and delivery.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's a wonderful guest today we have, so we can ask as as one of the question as we have in the mind. And first of all, thank you very much for joining me because some of them people are so early, some of them so late. So we are living in the time zone challenges, and it's been very difficult for most of the time. But let's drive the conversation forward. Like, tell us about the CI/CD trend. Like when I joined, like in 2016, in the company called in here in Pakistan. So there is a trends going on. You just build out the code in your machine, then you push it up to the next stage. That's called the testing stage, and then you eventually move to the deployment stage, and that's actually another machine. So with the machine
Right.
challenges, you have built your code on your own
Right.
laptop, and when you test it out to the testing team, there are so many weird things happening, and you are trying to fight with each other. Is it this my fault? Isn't this is the setup
Yes.
fault? Who's actually responsible for that fault? And also when you deploy to the production, it's actually another thing, is another machine. And that's I have grown up. So tell us about how, because you have a wonderful experience it's been in this industry, tell us about how actually CI/CD system evolves over the year.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind me taking a moment to reflect back as you say that on a bit of my background. So my development career started at a company called Sony Computer Entertainment, now PlayStation. And when we talk about pre CICD, I clearly remember we had an extremely smart. I can now call him a kid because I'm old, right? But I was arguably a kid then. He was a little bit younger. A build and release engineer that used to sit in a cube down the hall, right? And we would use SourceSafe at that point, which wasn't truly, you know, a central shared SEM repository. And we code stuff up for the week, and then every once in a while we'd hand stuff to Chen, and then Chen would proceed to put that in his backlog. In a couple of days, when he can get to it, he'd then spend a couple of more days integrating. By the time he was done integrating, I was off on a bunch of other things. I maybe traveled to consult with the developer, started on a new coding project. And then the process of trying to work through his integration issues when he tried to build and compile the code took significantly more time because my mindset, I was out of context. I didn't have history to what I was doing. I didn't have continued visibility into what my colleagues were doing. And that there very much, reminds me of one of the core problems that CI and ultimately CD are there to solve, right? Very kind of maybe grossly put. Let's use centralized, shared, and automated build processes to find problems in code, whether that be quality issues, security issues, or other unintended implementations, as close as possible to when they were introduced. Because when we do that, the cost of fixing them is extremely cheaper. And let's just simply say, and of course, Sasha, Simon, I know you know this, but that establishing of a feedback loop in the continuous integration or strictly build process, find problems fast, closer to introductions, you can fix them more cheaply. With CD, just extends all the way out to pre-prod and then ultimately production.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a grown up. Like, I'm wishing for the days like we can remove this conflict. Like, everybody have a universal place. They can talk to each other. Like, we are talking the developer to the testing team, and language is actually different. Like, we are
Yes.
using that languages that is actually the testing team doesn't able to understand what the hell they are talking about. And when we
Yeah.
move to the deployment phase, like testing team is ready to move the code into the production, and the
Right.
production, the automation engineer is actually using the languages that actually developer and testing team don't know. So I'm
Yeah.
wishing on that time, like if we have a universal something, a universal that we can speak up to.
I think we're starting to get there. I look, if I think if some of us software vendors stop fighting to make markets and introduce new terms, maybe it'd stabilize. But I do think continuous integration and continuous delivery and some of the terminology and sort of idioms built around that do start to set a stage for common language, right? I think we how's I going to say it is, but we also have to kind of tear down some organizational and cultural barriers. And I think we're starting to see that happen. Really, continuous integration and continuous delivery focused on a shift left and was very much a developer delivering process, right? I speak to operations and QA professionals that say we're talking about CD and we're talking about DevOps, but the team never involved us in the discussion. Now, the reality is to truly recognize the promise of continuous delivery, especially as we know as being a part of the Ortelius project, continuous delivery in a world of multiple complex microservices. We can't just assume we're going to reliably push that from a developer's seat. We have to start to engage the downstream teams early on, and risk to throw in say so we can meet our goal of delivering quality, secure software rapidly, reliably, and repeatably. And you cannot do that at scale simply sitting in a developer seat.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Sasha,
can I just
I
ask a
like
question
you
quick?
because I saw you agreeing with me. So I'd love to.
No, I wanted to just kind of spin off what you were saying there, because we're outsourced to a client who's going on this journey, right? And it's the biggest challenge is, how do you change this culture? How do you educate the people that you interact with every day, from the developers to the guys who are building the platform, to the business people who are the managers or your project managers? What would you recommend a good starting point is to help a company who's embarking on this journey? To start, a good place to start, because I'm finding the communication thing and trying to get everybody aligned is the biggest challenge, and giving sort of an estimation of how long things could take, right?
Yeah. Well, do I get a render an opinion on that, Sasha? Because if you know me, I'm rarely accused of not having an opinion. Also rarely accused of being brief. Forewarning. No, I'll answer. Look, you said it. You wrapped the answer in there. You start, and I can be more specific, but generally you start with a base level of knowledge building and a base level of team building, right? And oftentimes I talk about this DevOps trinity: people and culture, process and practice, tools and technology, right? You will not be successful in delivering rapidly, reliably, repeatably at scale unless you address all of those areas. And so, yeah, I think you have to train people on the technology that they're going to be using. You have to begin to bring people into the kind of education of and definition of the process and practice. And you have to take some steps to build sort of a true culture. And we focus on doing it iteratively. It won't be big bang, but you do need to be thinking about all those things. And I would beg to say that managers, engineering leaders, and product managers also need to be aware that if they account for some of those steps up front, which may cost some time, they're going to be able to move faster later. That's, my opinion. And I know you guys have a similar level of experience. What if you don't mean me turning the tables, what have you found is important in starting to implement these CI/CD and DevOps practices?
Yes, absolutely. I think you drive the wonderful conversation forward here for us. Like the communication is one of the hardest challenge. Like,
Sure.
as we're telling, like, first you have to understand what other communicating with. Like, with the rise of the container, we actually come up to the point where everybody able to understand what actually they are talking about. Like, the project
Yes.
manager is actually talking about we are talking about containers. Like, also we're talking about in the development team, the testing team, the DevOps team, the automation team. They're all talking. They know the languages they are using at. Like,
Yes.
also and you have previously, you want to have a decoupled system, not everything within it, because it's a year of refactoring if you do that. And
Yes.
people are now moving to the microservices architecture, and that is actually because of the container ecosystem that is very simpler, very easy to deploy with, and the same language construct we are using at. So I think we come up to the point where everybody know what we are talking about. But
Yeah.
now it's a challenge of learning and educating people that the Sasha is talking about. You
Yeah.
need to
Right.
understand that the container is actually a part of the Linux ecosystem. You have to be comfortable learning Linux, and Linux has other languages, and Windows have other languages code construct. So you
That.
need to be able to understand how the Linux work, how the
Yeah.
container ecosystem evolve. And also I think when we move forward, like, now is a trend is actually the container. But previously we don't able to talk about pull and pushes it. Push, pull, push, pull. We just talk
Right.
about the pull images or these kind of stuff. And now we
Right.
are pulling the images and pushing the images all the time. That is
Right.
a new language that people
Right.
has to understand about it. So I think, because I think Sasha, and for you, I think you have a broader experience relative to mine. So tell us about, like, we have tools, we have technologies, we have everything set up, like learning resources, amount of the learning resources right now we don't have in the previous time. That is
Yeah.
another good point. Also,
Yeah.
there are foundations, open source projects, like we have Ortelius community that working with the microservices and these kind of stuff. So I think right now is the collaboration, the communication is each rather than is easy right now, rather than it's more complex or difficult or have hurdles in communicating with the people. So I think we're moving in a good direction, but I think it's need to be we have to be stay consistent, because we
Yeah.
don't have consistency. It's really tougher hill to climb about it. And also tell us about, like, some of the organization that came up to the DevOps time, on the time that they're just thinking about the DevOps, and there are two, three new terminologies come into the picture, like microservices, like the
Yeah.
container ecosystem, like the GitOps, and the gateway of doing things, and the Kubernetes. So tell us about how these new startups or the organization overcome those challenges.
Well, yeah, it's oh God, there's so much there, Sam. Uh, First, I'd say one of the thoughts you had there that really kind of is the challenge of monoliths or highly coupled systems is it's almost like trying to work one of those tile games where to move a tile over you have to slide another, or think a Rubik's cube, right? Every time I turn one to get a square in another place, I'm affecting something else, and you get this cyclical effect. So in decoupling systems and going to microservices, use the cliche term of two pizza teams, right? We get some freedom to implement those CI/CD practices that we've talked about and move a little faster without the complexity of setting up a Rubik's Cube, right? But then we kind of have another layer of complexity to manage because we have multiple streams cutting across our functional groups, dev, test, our platform team, our deployment team, so on and so forth. And again, I think when you go to that, all of a sudden the Rubik's Cube comes back in, right? Because now when I implement a new tool or modernize on the left-hand side, that may have a downstream impact on what we're doing in terms of our deployment automation, how we're deploying our containers. Now, I'll kind of get to the technologies and how they help a bit more of that in a minute. But again, like a Rubik's Cube, every move we make affects one of our downstream software development or upstream software development and delivery partners. And the way we avoid every time we turn our Rubik's Cube sort of hurting each other is ensuring that we have constant communication. Look, tools are going to change. Technologies are going to change. Process is going to change. And yes, we have solutions like immutable environments, right, and containers, and ways that we can sort of democratically, arguably, orchestrate our cloud native deployments with Kubernetes. But that does not negate the need for tight coordination between the participants in the software development and delivery lifecycle. I think I missed your questions about trends there. I might have not answered your specific question.
No, I think you could draw wonderful, but like I'm just talking about like some of the organization, they just heard about the term DevOps. And when they try to implement DevOps, they see the new language came into the picture, like the container, GitOps, orchestration. And they are figuring out how do we able to understand all those in. Is there a way to overcome this challenge?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to state an obvious one considering the group here, my past experience. You know what? Leaning on the community, crowdsource your knowledge, but also realize that again, there are a constant stream of trends, and these are very important trends that we know. But don't worry about understanding and implementing all of them. Again, move in increments. Figure out what like I used to say in this 4 quadrants of DevOps maturity kind of talk that I used to give is understand where you are, figure out where you want to go, then figure out how to get there. That's where you determine does application of Scrum principles, or application of microservices architectures, GitOps principles for the delivery, do those make sense? But let's also, as those trends emerge, not just evaluate and discover on where are we, where do we want to get, how do we get there alone, but do it with your other stakeholders. Do it with the operations team. Do it with your SREs. And so, yeah, that would be my take. They're all important trends in the market. The ones we've leaned on, microservices, cloud native, Kubernetes, using containers, but they're not necessarily every single one of them is applicable to what your problem space is. So don't assume that as we here talk about trends in DevOps, that it automatically means it's something you need to go out and apply to your team.
That is so good.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I see the one question from the Utkarsh. He raises I see a challenge where organization spend a lot of time researching for what tool they want to include in their CI/CD process. Is there any standard for that?
Is there any standard for what tools to include in the CI/CD process? That's interesting. What I tend to do is manage, and you're starting to see this with platform teams, is manage your CI/CD tool selection almost as you would manage product requirements, right? So even if you're the consumer building it out, you're in an organization where now the term we're using to introduce new emerging terms is your platform ops team, and they're going to make a decision is you're always going to have to rank some trade-offs against, cost, complexity, um, um, feature depth, feature breadth. So what I have seen, and I sort of always recommend is to put together a your own sort of feature matrix. Talk to the various teams that may have to interact. Right. Again, if this person making this request was in the dev team, well, think about how it's going to impact downstream people. Your selection of CI/CD, gather their requirements, put them in a matrix, identify what I would say proven tools, if not also popular tools. Tools with a couch and open source are going to offer you a lot of favors, and then just go through the analysis, right? But what I will say is put a time limit on it, because you're never going to find everybody's perfect solution. You gather requirements, you do the analysis, you present it back to the team, and then you get people to agree to disagree where it doesn't meet their ideal prospects, and you move forward.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Hope it's answered the Utkarsh question.
Great.
And also another question, like how does CD change when you have independently deployed microservices moving to cluster all day long?
Well, that is so first it gets a lot more complex. Okay. And I'd like to be able to say that, thankfully, because microservices have inherent decoupling, that constant stream of multiple highways going to the same destination mitigates your risk for failure. And yeah, what it does is it isolates it, right? It doesn't necessarily mitigate it. Yes, a broken component is less likely to bring down the whole system, but you could use a critical service. So one is, I'd say, going back to the earlier question, is that is going to help drive your tooling choices, right? You have distinctly different needs for what your tooling capabilities are when you're managing 10, 20, 50 different in-house services that compose your system or application plus others. So and I guess it'd get too detailed to get into specific practices. But I would say, one, you should be looking at a way to dynamically capture and track a canonical record of your microservices and the status of those services. You should be able to integrate some level of common CI and CD across those systems. So at any given time, it's easy to see where they are in the delivery process, track versions, track deployments, understand where they're used. I'd say, again, using a bit of a cliche term now, is it is that much more important when you have those multiple microservices to have a macro view of your software supply chain.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful points. Learned a lot during the discussion. And also, I think the point you raise here, like people are working on some set of core technologies, and you don't have enough time to see what people or other talking in the ecosystem. That way, community and crowd and learning in public comes in. Like you were talking about just one tool, and the community is talking about the Kubernetes, Argo CD, the GitOps, but you are just into the market of DevOps. I think for the people who are just in the market, they can do is they can go to the communities, the open source communities, where they can learn more cloud native or GitOps languages, or the Strands languages, I would rather call it. And that's, I think, Ortelius open source project is like one of our core construct is to learn and educate the community around the new open source tooling, the microservices architecture, the CI/CD systems. And I think anybody who listening or watching us, there is a GitHub link available for you on the screen. Go ahead that and join our community or the Discord server where Sasha, me, we're always talking about it. One of our other friends from the Ortelius office hour, Sergio, is also joining. Thanks, Sergio, for joining us today. And we can talk about all day these things. We want to have your question going, and we can make your life easier as a CI/CD or the automation engineer, automation expert. So I think it's been living in the public and ask question. I think this give you a wonderful learning experience. So before we go, tell us about what is going to be happen next, like because is the CI/CD or DevOps or the cloud native? This is a rapidly evolving system. So final thoughts on where to go and learn about these things.
Yeah. Well, I heard two questions in there, right? What's going to happen next? And I do think, look, there are multiple components of kind of modern software development and delivery. We mentioned some of those: process, GitOps, architecture, microservices, right? Some practices, observability, right? All of these things are going to kind of continue to progressively mature. So we're not done with the maturation of any of this. But what I really see, and I see the Ortelius project doing, as well as a number of people in the microservices and observability space, is we still have to complete the promise of a continuous feedback loop end to end, right? I think oftentimes when we talk about CI/CD, we're doing local optimization, localized optimization. We establish a feedback loop within dev, between dev and test. We bring in the SRE that's supposed to kind of establish a feedback loop kind of in between the groups. But we still strive to get a continuous view on what we're making, where it was used, how it was deployed, who used it, how it performed, so we can bring that back and collectively improve. So with all of that, I'd say I see a continued growth of microservices, especially enterprise adoption, where it can be particularly hard, but where it also has a particular level of value. I see our competency increasing there. I am seeing, rapid growth in application around observability. And I do think that right now observability is often looked at as just an extension of logging and monitoring. But what we're going to start to see with that tooling is observability is going to start to focus more on what the user experience is. Meanwhile, we're going to start to surface the intelligence and analytics of observability more to the developer, right? And I think this also speaks to what Ortelius is doing, right? We need to understand what our services supply chain looks like, right? What our health is. And it's not just your SRE. It's not just your architect. It helps for the engineering leads and the developers building those services and the systems that use them to have that same view. So long story short, we have to continue to build that continuous feedback loop. I would recommend, like we said, go spend time in the Ortelius community. Go look at some of the landscapes out there with CNCF or with Open Software Security Foundation, where they're kind of looking at supply chain. Also been working with and recently had a great conversation with the founder of StackShare. StackShare is building a community around tools and technology and tech stacks and driving discussions around those. So, find a community, engage in the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And Sasha, final shot from your side.
Cheapers. I feel like I've just been at a buffet and
just don't eat the salmon. The salmon.
Yeah, don't eat. It was, it's such a good discussion, and I've learned so much myself. I mean, all the things that you spoke of, Brian, are the challenges that I'm facing in my own work, and wow, I got such pearls of wisdom there. So thank you so much, and it's been an awesome chat so far. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Why not? We definitely have it stay in touch and we can do continuous discussion on that. And that's part of the discussion we actually do on the Ortelius Discord all the time. And everybody listening or watching to us, join our Discord server, go to the Ortelius.io website and join in. Like we have all day, all long this discussion going on. And I learned a lot. Like Brian, is first time I talking to you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Hope to have you
Yeah.
again in the future as well, because the lesson I learned is so, it has so many values in it, and I want to establish a learning and consistent way of learning the new technologies, a challenge. So in this point, I think people who are watching or listening to us get a valuable insight from the Brian. And if you need any other discussion, we want to see what next we cover in the Ortelius podcast in the discussion. Let us know, and we will continuously monitor your chat, and we'll definitely where to go on this podcast in the future. So thank you everyone who join us on the Ortelius podcast. We hope to have you again in the future. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye, everyone.